Hello, 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 and welcome to a very exciting week at the Kalish Institute. Uh, Gosh, where do I even start? I don't know. I don't know where to start. My life is just so charmed at this point. We should probably just talk about H. pylori. I'll just ramble for like an hour. But I would say that this year, just so if you guys want to meet me in person, it would be great. I'll be at the IFM International Conference, their annual conference in Florida, which is coming up not too far away in May. I'll be in Japan at the end of May. If you happen to be in Japan, I'll be speaking at their anti-aging conference. And then I'll be in Portland, Oregon in July for a week, where IFM is going to be teaching several modules. And then I'll be in Nashville in October. If you guys are local to Nashville, I'll be at the IFM conferences and modules that are being taught in Nashville. So anyways, there's lots of opportunities to meet me. Basically, just look at the IFM schedule and I'll be at all those events. And my office and my class will have a booth at most of those events, not all of them, but most of them. So you just come look for the Kalish booth. I'll be hanging around, and I always like to meet people in person, and always encourage you guys to go to IFM conferences too, because you learn a lot. So we're going to talk about. I want to talk about H. pylori tonight, and I want to talk about my latest understanding of this after having treated it for so many decades. And I want to kind of upend our thinking process a little bit. So tonight's going to be challenging um, thought-wise, but let's just jump into it and see where it takes us. So I'm going to start off with a really simple story, which is started 20 years ago. There's my son. That's when he was, I don't know, 3 or something like that. And what a cutie he was, a great guy. And then he grew up. I don't know how that happened, but here he is now. He just came home for Christmas. Very proud of him. He's at Washington University in St. Louis. Um, he's not doing pre-med. It's a very well-known medical school there, pre-med department, but he's doing math and physics, and super happy to see his life do so well. He's got a summer internship doing research as a freshman at the biophysics labs at WashU, and it's kind of off and running. But the reason why we're talking about my son is because when, I raised this kid and, spent a lot of time with him. For a long time, I was a single dad and, very close to this guy, put a lot of energy into him and loved him very, very much and still do, obviously. But then, in August, he just decided to up and go to college and just grabbed a backpack and a couple of boxes, and his mom bought him some sheets, and he was gone, And so what did I do? I got really stressed. It was the first time that I had had a weekend with nothing to do since I was like 25 years old. And so my response to that was not very good. I sat around, I ate a lot of ice cream, I ate a lot of pizza, I put on all this weight, I got kind of fat, I stopped exercising. I mean, it was like a little bit like being depressed, but I wasn't sad. I was just like sitting in my house going, well, what the hell am I supposed to do now? After all these years of being a parent. And I also had raised, several stepchildren. So there's a lot more kids in my life than just my son. And anyways, all of a sudden I found myself single and with all this free time, I didn't know what to do with myself. And my health took a precipitous decline. Thankfully, I snapped out of it and I'm back to working out and eating normal and being healthy. But the point is that when we're under stress, sometimes you don't really know it. Like you wouldn't think your kid going to college would be that big a deal, but it was for me. And what we're going to talk about tonight in regards to H. pylori is how we respond to stress on a physiological level and how that impacts everything about our health, And I actually did, after a month or 2 months of eating ice cream and pizza and burgers and fries, I did start to develop heartburn, although I don't think I picked up H. pylori. But, the whole point of this is that we got to look a little deeper into what we're talking about here. So for those of you that are new to me, I'll just do a few intro slides. I've been in practice forever. We've trained a lot of people. I teach this amazing mentorship program, which you guys should all take. And we're signing up a new class in a couple weeks. If you've been thinking about taking the mentorship, you should jump on board because I've developed a whole bunch of new tools right now. I created a whole new fundamentals of functional medicine section in the mentorship, which is, I don't know, so I think it's 15 or 20 hours of curriculum on program design and a real nitty-gritty clinical application of functional medicine. We've also now, or I've been working with Dr. Richard Lord for 2 years now, day and night, on developing new content for the class in terms of lab interpretation. So it's a robust and really intense community. I'll give you a little tour around it in a few minutes. But if you're thinking about taking the class, this is a really good time to do it because it's gotten incredibly good. We haven't really raised the price. It's still the same price. I just keep adding more and more stuff to it. I was originally trained by naturopaths, and what I want to kind of focus on tonight is this stress response. Like in my case, my son going to college, it could be someone going through a divorce, it could be a lot of different things, and how that stress response impacts secretory IgA, and how it impacts what we eat, and how it impacts our microbiome, and how that impacts H. pylori. And so, in my early years of training, in my first 10 years of understanding this, life was very simple. It was, I see there's H. pylori on the lab. I see a patient that has a bunch of symptoms, and I get rid of the H. pylori, and the symptoms get better. And I now understand it's so much more nuanced and complex than that, that tonight I just want to really think through some of the deeper ramifications of what we're doing and what the organisms like H. pylori are, and I now realize that they're on a spectrum, right? They're on a spectrum from potential pathogen to full-blown pathogen to not causing any problems at all. And what determines where that H. pylori is in terms of its pathogenicity is what? It's their stress response and the health and functioning of our microbiome. Okay, so let's say that again. What determines whether H. pylori is going to cause vomiting, nausea, heartburn, pain, and bleeding and ulcers and a horrific symptomatic expression, or if H. pylori is just going to be sitting there, maybe even doing some good things and being protective, is the state of your microbiome and the state of your mind, how stressed out you are. But look at me when my son went to college. I mean, how many pints of, I don't like Ben & Jerry's at all. In fact, if you put a thing of Ben & Jerry's in front of me right now, I probably would not even eat it. But Haagen-Dazs, I could eat, either butter pecan, Rocky Road, or coffee Haagen-Dazs, whole pint, no problem. And I could eat like a half a pizza too, After doing that for long enough, you just imagine what my microbiome was like, right? No wonder why I started to get heartburn. So these things are intertwined, right? Stress eating, the microbiome, this is all really connected. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in a sec. So then this approach, right, is the Kalish method, whatever you want to call it. This is like the common sense method, is to reduce inflammation through diet and lifestyle, to restore the microbiome, to restore secretory IgA levels, and then kill the bugs. In fact, if you restore the microbiome functions and restore secretory IgA levels, you might not even need to kill the bugs. That's the ironic part in all this, yeah? So just want to keep that in mind as a bigger picture. It's not the H. pylori that's the problem. It's the destruction of the microbiome and the stress-induced problems with secretory IgA that are the real problems. And it's very easy to just get caught in this idea that we're just going to kill the bugs and people are going to get better. And it's just too simplistic and it doesn't work, especially for chronically ill patients with a lot of GI stuff. Okay, so common failures: using the wrong treatment sequence, right? Just, oh, there's H. pylori, I'm just going to treat that and I'm going to ignore the microbiome, ignore the diet, and ignore the stress. That doesn't work very well, okay? We want to restore everything first, then kill stuff, and then restore it even more. That's kind of like the goal. And there's also lab testing issues. You can miss this stuff on labs pretty easily, so you want to be careful about that. So, and when we're talking about stress, talking about cortisol, we're talking about, you guys should know this pretty well, the adrenal thing, the HPA axis, right? We're under stress. What matters for tonight when we're under stress is that the stress interferes with cortisol, and that interferes in turn with secretory IgA, which is the immune response in the gut. So we end up with this weakening of the immunity in the gut lining, and that allows for parasites, bacteria, and yeast to start to proliferate. Okay. What's equally important, and perhaps even more important than the stress response, is the health and integrity of the microbiome itself. And I'm going to show you some different slides in a moment about that, okay? Because I think that's really like the mission critical part of this. And I get patients all the time who have had H. pylori or had blastocystis. We had one this morning. She had Dientamoeba fragilis. It almost doesn't matter what the GI bug is. Practitioners tried to treat it, wouldn't go away. Why didn't it work? Okay, because we're not doing this on a symptomatic level, and we're not doing this just to kill bugs. We're killing bugs in the context of strengthening the immune response and strengthening the microbiome, which in a way you could argue is kind of the same thing. Okay. So if your patient has anxiety, acid reflux, fatigue, it really doesn't matter what the manifestation of the H. pylori problem is, right? A lot of the patients that I work with H. pylori, they're just like vomiting every morning. They just get nauseous, they wake up, they throw up, and then they go on with their day. I can't tell you how many more patients than I can count who have that as a chief complaint. I mean, that's so frightening to think that you would just be that sick and not know that it was H. pylori, right? It could also be completely removed from GI symptoms whatsoever, right? 100% removed from GI symptoms. And that's why these GI bugs get to be so slippery. Because what if you have H. pylori and that's actually causing your fatigue, but there's a complete absence of digestive symptoms? It's a very difficult thing to wrap your mind around and to know what to treat. So the patients are always going to relate to clusters of symptoms, to the fatigue or the heartburn or the bloating. But we want to take a bigger picture, take a step back. I'm very deeply involved in a Taoist meditation practice now, and my teacher is this man named Gerard, and I see him every Friday, and we spend 3 or 4 hours together, and every week he says this one thing, so I know it means I haven't understood what he's saying yet, but I want to try to at least quote him. He's like, Dan, you're looking at the grains of sand on the beach. You got to take a step back and look at the entire beach. So the grains of the sand in our situation here is the H. pylori and getting overly focused on the heartburn and the bloating and the fatigue. Taking a deep breath in, we're taking a step back and we're looking at the whole beach. And then we see stress, microbiome, adrenals, as the real reason why the H. pylori has become a problem. Okay, so we can't just ignore that. We need to treat and correct all the body systems in this general context. And if you can do this and do this successfully, you'll get H. pylori every single time. I mean, I still want to kill this stuff, right? We're not saying we're not going to want to kill it, but we want to address all the body systems in an integrated way and not just isolate the GI. And the most common error that I've made in practice, and I see still a lot of doctors make, is they treat GI first. And I don't think that's a good idea because you need to take the time to strengthen the microbiome before you do any killing, to strengthen the secretory IgA response, the immune response, before you do any killing. All right. And if you can do that, then you'll be the master of treating H. pylori. It'll actually start to seem kind of easy, and it might even get a little boring. So I'm just going to cut over to a slightly different slideshow for a moment because I'm mushing things around here. I apologize about that. Just give me one sec here. Because I want to talk a little bit about when I say microbiome, what I mean. What's this guy even talking about? And let's look at some of the specific bacteria that we're talking about. Here they are. So these are the commensal bacteria. These are normal, healthy bacteria. Everyone agrees you're supposed to have these. Not a lot of controversy. And they're divided up into, in this diagram here, different categories. Okay, there's hydrogen producers, hydrogen consumers, and then there's some of the key organisms here, like Methanobrevor smithii, desulfovibrio pyger. All right, and these bacteria are pretty interesting in that they do different things. They make hydrogen. Some of them consume hydrogen. Some of them live on sulfur. They have their whole own lives going on, and they're doing their whole own thing. And in general, they are highly responsive to foods that we eat that will either encourage them to grow or discourage them to grow. You can, of course, also use probiotics and prebiotic supplements, but obviously the foods are a better way to go. So this then brings up the question is, are the pathogens bad? If you have H. pylori and a healthy microbiome, are you going to have symptoms? Probably not. If you have H. pylori and a damaged microbiome and a lot of emotional stress, and your SIG-A is low, then H. pylori is going to cause a problem really consistently. So some of these organisms like H. pylori are kind of on a spectrum, right? They can be good or bad depending on the host. Some of these organisms I would say are always bad. I have some, I always think E. histo is bad. I don't think there's a friendly version of E. histo, but I think there is a friendly version of H. pylori, just depending on what's going on. And so a couple of these bacteria just to keep in mind, M. smithii, D. pyger, these are the hydrogen consumers, right? And they have their whole own thing going on. They can be related to cardiovascular disease, to obesity. There's a whole own thing happening with these good bacteria. These are the ones that remove hydrogen, okay, D. pyger and M. smithii. So there's bacteria that produce it, there's bacteria that remove it. And they can be tied into everything from obesity to fatigue to neurological problems. We've got all kinds of research here. I'm just going to kind of flip through these kind of quick. There's the gut bacteria, they can measure gut bacteria changing in brain function. Okay, so we just want to keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about the H. pylori, that there's a lot of other bacteria going on here that are setting the stage for the H. pylori becoming a problem. So when you're going to target and kill the H. pylori, it's got to be in the context of the general microbiome and its status. And if you ignore that, then people aren't going to do very well. And you can get a pretty straightforward improvement in the microbiome just by changing that person's diet in the first couple of months before you start to go after and kill the H. pylori. And there's two general ways you can do that. There are foods that have the fiber that the bacteria need to grow, and those foods are called beans, pinto beans, black beans, lentils. It could be hummus. It could be navy beans. People need to eat beans to get the fiber for these commensal bacteria to grow. Second category, polyphenols. Polyphenols are found in fruits and vegetables. The bacteria feed on the polyphenols, hence one of the major benefits of eating fruits and vegetables. So increasing fruits and vegetables, increasing beans in that first couple of months sets that person up to start to grow the healthy microbacteria, the healthy microbiome, the healthy bacteria start to come back. And then when you get down to killing the H. pylori, you should have a much easier time of it. And just as a total aside, because you should know this, and honestly, I think most of us don't know this. And I'll tell you, everything that I teach is something that I learned and was so embarrassed that I didn't know that I remembered it. So now I'm teaching it. So don't feel bad if you don't know this. But you're supposed to know this. But how are you supposed to find out that this? I don't know how you're supposed to learn this stuff, but you're supposed to just know this through osmosis. But let me just show you. If you're running organic acids profiles, there's a really important part of the test here. And it's measuring these polyphenols. Remember I said that you need two things for a healthy microbiome. You need bacteria to grow from feeding on the fiber in beans. So everybody needs to be eating beans every day, basically. Everybody every day should be eating beans and greens, right? And then you have to get the polyphenols. So the polyphenols you can actually measure, and if you guys are doing organic acids already, you're actually measuring the polyphenols. You probably don't know it. So look at these markers here. This whole section I'm circling now, benzoate, hippurate, you see phenyl acetate, phenyl propionate, parahydroxyphenyl acetate. This whole section is measuring dietary phenols and their effect on bacteria. Did you know that? I don't know. Raise your hand if you already knew that. We're online. I wish we had a live audience here because I can't look in the audience. But did anyone know that? Really, seriously, raise your hand if you knew that. I don't see anyone raising their hand. See, I didn't know that either. Does that just kind of piss you off a little bit that you've been running this test and you didn't know the whole point of this whole section? Pissed me off. When I learned it, I'm like, geez Louise, why didn't somebody tell me that? Okay, benzoate, hippurate, phenyl acetate, phenyl propionate, hydroxybenzoate, parahydroxyphenyl acetate. Each one of these markers is measuring the effect of dietary phenols on bacteria. That's the point of this whole section, number 36 through 41. So with this particular patient, let's see what we find. We see that many of these phenol markers are low. You see all these lows? Let me count them. That's low, that's low, that's low, and those are low. So 1, 2, well, we can just, it's even easier just to look at the ones that aren't low. There's only one that's not. So if you have low markers in this section, you have a patient that is not eating enough dietary polyphenols. They're not getting enough fruits and vegetables, and their microbiome is sucking wind. Okay? Where do you want to see these markers? You want to see them robust and in the high end of the normal range. That indicates sufficient fruits and vegetables for a healthy microbiome. You could just get off the call right now. I mean, it's just worth learning that one little thing. If you're running a lot of organic acids, this will just really open up your eyes. Now you've got a section that tells you, is my patient getting enough polyphenols to have a healthy microbiome? In this case, it's absolutely no. So how are you going to get rid of the H. pylori if the person doesn't even have the healthy commensal bacteria up to speed? Okay, all these low markers are really significant. And the way that I half-ass learn this stuff, and I'll tell you this is totally inaccurate, was I just kind of assumed, I don't know why, because that if these markers were high, it was bad. You know, oh, that's too many bacteria, it's SIBO or whatever. It has nothing to do with SIBO. This is a vegetable and fruit analysis here. And if these markers are low, oh, I guess that's okay. I don't know. It doesn't say it's bad. I don't know, right? So you want these markers in the high end of the normal range that shows robust and balanced commensal bacterial growth, that shows a patient who's eating enough fruits and vegetables. These markers are low. You've got a deficit of polyphenols, a deficit of fruits and vegetables, and hence a problem with the microbiome. It's a little more complicated than that. Some of these markers, when they're high, are a big problem. Like if benzoate is high or HIPAA rate is high, means a bunch of different stuff. But I just want to introduce this kind of radical concept that the low levels are important, okay? Low levels are important. And we don't have time, I think, to get into what the high levels mean, but maybe at the end, if there's some questions, I can cover that. Okay, so I think that's kind of important. Polyphenols, fiber, that's our, first line defense against H. pylori, okay? So let's assume that you've worked with the diet, you've got them on a program for a couple months, they're eating beans and greens every day, they're getting their fruits and vegetables for the polyphenols, the inflammation in their gut's going down, all this good stuff is happening, and now we're thinking about, okay, we could start to kill something. H. pylori itself can cause horrific amounts of damage. I mean, I've just seen the worst things from H. pylori. It's an infection that scares the heck out of me, to be honest. Symptoms could be anything from upper GI pain to a patient who says, "Oh, I'm fine as long as I take my HCl and digestive enzymes, or as long as I take my Tums or antacid, I'm fine." Could be constipation or nausea. Could happen in a child. Could happen in an older adult. Could be a lot of pain. These are the common, obvious symptoms because they're digestive related. But remember, a large number of people without H. pylori are not going to have any GI symptoms at all, right? And so, again, remember, the whole point of this talk is that if your microbiome is in good shape, H. pylori can be protective. I'm going to say that again. If your microbiome is in good shape and your secretory IgA is in good shape, H. pylori can be a positive thing to have. Okay, it can help with the general diversity of the organisms in your body and can be positive. We're talking about H. pylori going bad when the microbiome has gone bad and when the stress has gone bad. So it's contextual. It's a single organism. It can be helpful and friendly and really good for you, and it can turn on you if your body gets damage to the microbiome or to your stress response, right? That's the whole point tonight, right? So you can't just say H. pylori is categorically bad. But how many of our patients that walk in have a perfect microbiome and have great secretory IgA and normal adrenal function? Not that many. They wouldn't be seeing us if they had all that. So assuming your microbiome's messed up, your H. pylori is flaring up, assuming your SIG-A is weak and low, your adrenals are trashed, your H. pylori is flaring up, now we're getting into what that causes, okay? Damage to the stomach, reduced stomach acid, can even lead to problems with cancer. You can get it from food, you can get it from kissing. You'll also find a fair number of people with H. pylori where it's gone bad, not where it's commensal or good, right? Where the H. pylori has gone bad, has become a pathogen at this point. Do you realize that pathogenicity is a relative term, right? We're talking about the same organism, either good or bad. I don't know. It's probably like human beings too, right? You can be one person and one day you're a good person, the next day you're a bad person. I mean, maybe that's just how life is. So one of the effects, if it goes bad, is there's a lot of tissue damage and inflammation, and that can have a really dramatic effect on the brain. It can cause this kynurenate pathway to go bad, and it can cause depression, anxiety, fatigue, and all kinds of cognitive problems, okay? So that's a whole nother issue that we want to work on. And that can happen either in the dopamine system, in the serotonin system, but you can have the primary effect, the primary negative effect of H. pylori can actually be exerted on the brain. You can also have stomach function if it goes on for long enough, you're not absorbing amino acids, and you can have a whole host of problems with your mitochondria and with your brain simply because of the amino acid absorption problem. You can also have inflammation and oxidative stress that catapults H. pylori into this whole other level of badness, right? And so For the bacteria itself, you can pick it up in a variety of different ways, from kissing, from bad food. Many people have H. pylori and are healthy and fine. This is not always a bad thing, right? And it can cause a tremendous amount of damage to the digestive tract lining. I think that the problem is in our profession, and this is something that I've struggled with for a long time, is that by the time people reach us, they generally have a fair amount of pretty bad things going on. And by the time people reach us, if they do have H. pylori, it's generally going to be a problem that you're going to want to treat. If you had healthy, fit, happy people walking in the door all the time, I'm sure it would be a completely different scenario. You would probably have the majority of the folks that you're working with have H. pylori, but not have a problem with it. Okay, so again, this is all contextual. This is why it's complicated, because it's not really super clear cut. And I'll cover questions at the end, so please keep asking questions. I'll cover them at the end, okay? This is a time for a commercial announcement. This is when I get to talk about how great the class is. I've become like the lab whisperer now. I mean, I was always decent at doing lab interpretation, but I've been in the school of hard knocks for 2 years now with Richard Lord. Who is Richard? You all know Richard. He wrote the book. I keep it by my bedside now, by my desk side. Don't leave home without it. Laboratory Evaluations in Integrative and Functional Medicine. Why do I keep it with me? Because every week Richard quizzes me on questions from this book, and I have to know. So I'm kind of peaking professionally right now. And Richard, who wrote that book, Richard, who designed the organic acids profile, the GI effects profile, has just decided to literally dedicate the last years of his life to training me. I'm not bragging about this. This puts me in a very humble position. If anything, it's a huge responsibility to carry on the work of the titan in our field, right? I mean, it's just a privilege and an honor that I'm doing this. And so the point of the Kalish Institute has changed. It used to be Dan teaching classes. Now it's Dan teaching Richard Lord's work, and the up-leveling here, it's like going from a community college class that was decent to being, at Princeton, Harvard, and Yale, and Columbia all at the same time, right? This is like we're getting really the best information from the top scientists in the world in our field, and it's all coming out through my classes now. So every day I teach live calls. I'm talking to Richard on Monday and communicating to you what he's teaching me throughout the week. So it's a significant change for me professionally and for the course itself in the last couple of years. And the class itself has these different modules. We also have this wonderful community that I have built. Spent a lot of time working on this, where you can search through and find cases just for fun. Let's look at resources here. For example, you get an H. pylori case, and let's say you go to the case study library, and you're like, I got this H. pylori lab. We're going to talk about it in class next week, but until then, I want to look up H. pylori. Type it into here, and you'll have case after case after case. We have like 2,000-3,000 cases now in here about everything from H. pylori to toenail fungus, okay? And each one of the cases is transcribed. It's on video. You can listen to it on your phone. You can read about it. And there's just an endless amount of information, as well as all the clinical application stuff. We have a ridiculous amount of things that are more around the areas of practice building. So I don't know, it could be anything from, let's just look at case studies here, or clinical topics. If you I don't know, you want to buy a new EMR system, type EMR in, and there'll be all kinds of talks and discussions around myself. Oh, sorry, that didn't work, did it? Around that particular subject matter. Oh, I'm searching in the wrong area. That's why. Let me go up here. This should work. Sorry, I was searching in the wrong area. There we go. Again, EMR, and these are discussions between doctors. These are lecture materials. These are interviews. And again, just on and on and on and on. This is more information than anyone can handle. We've been pumping information into this community for years now. Okay, so we have the community, we have the curriculum, and I am now jet fueled by the power of Richard Lord in terms of my lab interpretation skills. They're at a level which is truly frightening. I can see things on labs now that I couldn't even imagine seeing 2 years ago. And the interesting thing too, I know maybe this will encourage all of you, even after 20 years of doing this, you can get better at it. Like I thought I kind of knew what I was doing before I met Richard. I was kind of comfortable with my skill set, but man, the level I'm at now, I can just look at labs and I just see exactly what's going on with someone. Oh, we got the new material that I mentioned, the fundamentals of functional medicine. This was me sitting down for about 6 months and laying out a whole new level of curriculum around program design, patient communication skills and stuff. And that is just jammed into the class. There's no extra cost for that. If you take the 1-year mentorship, you get all this new material as well as the stuff that I'm doing with Richard. All comes as part of the class. We're starting a new group April 24th. I would love it if a few of you sign up because I have a lot of information I want to share with you. And I need doctors to teach it to, okay? Let's see. All right, let's get back. The commercial advertisement is over. I'm going to take a drink of water because I'm thirsty. All right, so treatment. We talked about how you treat the microbiome, beans and greens, right? Fruits and vegetables. Sure, use probiotics if you want. You can use inulin or chicory or the prebiotics if you want. That's great too. How do you treat for secretory IgA? Those are the adrenal programs. Pregnenolone and DHEA and the adaptogenic herbs and blood sugar control. Treating the adrenals is going to improve SIG-A. It's going to reduce inflammation and improve mucosal immunity. Okay, so treating the adrenals is treating SIG-A. Treating the diet with the diet is treating the microbiome. That's our setup, right? That's our first step. We get all that in place. Give it a couple months. I know that sounds like a long time, but 60 days goes really fast. And 60 days is kind of the magic mark for most people to start to get control over the inflammation. And then you can go on a killing spree and wipe out the H. pylori. And you'll get it almost every time if you do it this way. If you try to treat it too aggressively, too quickly, and you don't have that microbiome in place, and you don't have that SIG-A coming up to support you, you've got a weakened immune system, you've got crappy quality bacteria in the gut, it's less and less and less likely that you'll get the H. pylori. Now, there's a counter argument here, and I just want to bring it up because it's a valid argument. Do you even need to treat the H. pylori? Well, I don't know. You could work on the diet, get the adrenals working well, and create the most robust and happy and genetically diverse microbiome on the planet. And the H. pylori problem might just disappear as a part of that. I have not achieved that level of greatness yet in my practice. So I still do the 2 months and then kill the stupid thing. Okay, but if you're ascending to a higher plane of functional medicine understanding, and you can really get the microbiome and the stress response dialed in, you could probably just call it a day there and not have to kill it. Okay, but I still take a great amount of interest in and joy in killing bad bacteria in the gut, so I still do it. All right, so there's different kinds of testing. There's a PCR test. There's antigens. There's blood antibodies. And what are the best? I rely upon stool antigens from a lab called Biohealth, and I rely upon the PCR DNA testing from a lab test kit called the GI map from Diagnostic Solutions. So those are the two that I use. Again, antigen testing, stool antigen testing from Biohealth, and the GI map, which has the PCR or DNA-based testing for H. pylori. It's quite comprehensive, by the way, to do both of those. I have to tell you, you're going to find it on one sometimes and not on the other. Sometimes it'll show up on both, sometimes just on one. Let me give you a quick look at the lab itself. Here's the actual GI map. If you guys are not familiar with this, you should order a few of these. Just order 10 of them. And it has a special section here on H. pylori. Okay. And this is a DNA-based test, right? So they're not looking for the actual complete organism. They're looking for the DNA of the organism. It's the same exact test they would do in a crime lab if they found a drop of blood and they want to look for the DNA of a human being, right? They're looking for the DNA of H. pylori, so they can find things that other labs would miss. So you just keep that in mind as a helpful thing. Yeah, and I'll show you my sequence here. Oops, sorry, I got off track. Where'd it go? There we go. So we test for it, we kill it, we do all the preparation stuff, we kill it, we replace, and then we repair things. You guys know that already probably. So there's a couple of different treatments. Conventional doctors, if the H. pylori is bad enough, would use a Prev pack. I'm not against that. Sometimes it's appropriate. We had this kid last summer, 15-year-old kid, you know, he was in so much pain. He couldn't go to school. He couldn't play football. Couldn't do anything. You know, he went to his pediatrician. They treated the H. pylori with a drug. The idea of putting that kid on 2 months of herbs, I don't know. It didn't make sense to anybody. It certainly didn't make sense to the parents. I mean, he's waking up and vomiting and with really severe stomach pain every day. So, you know, off to the doctor you go. If it's a milder problem, you know, there's just heartburn, I think antibiotics are probably overkill. The medical doctors that I work with these days, they don't want to give out the antibiotics unless they have to. But if the kid's vomiting and can't, you know, play sports because his stomach hurts every day so much, then yeah, that's a reasonable, you know, use of medication. And if it's heartburn and fatigue, you're probably going to do better with the Mastica. And I have this one protocol I've used for H. pylori. I just have used it since the first day I started to treat H. pylori. Maybe I'm a little superstitious. I don't know. This is just how I do it. I use Mastica and then some anti-inflammatories like slippery elm and DGL. Works for me every time. I'm probably going to die using Mastica in my practice. I'll be holding a bottle of Mastica as I fall over in my clinic and drop dead. But anyways, it's always worked for me. There are many other ways you can treat H. pylori. I totally understand that. Why would I change it when it works so well? So I like Mastica. All the big companies that we work with, not all of them, but almost all of them have a Mastica related product. It's not hard to find, okay? And then of course, probiotics and then repair stuff. So, but remember, that part is relatively easy. And the reason why I'm so successful treating H. pylori is because of the setup, right? Using the Mastica, the herb, and the Mastica is made from Chios tree in Greece or something like that. It's an herb that's been present for thousands of years. People have been using Mastica. It's also considered a general stomach tonic. Some people use it every day and a little bit. I mean, there's a whole history to Mastica as an herb, but in the higher dosages, it's very effective for killing H. pylori. Okay. Children, a lot of kids have H. pylori, causes a lot of problems. Some of my most beautiful and successful cases have been children with H. pylori. Just makes you want to cry when you fix them. They're so much healthier and better. Girls with eating disorders. Was it an eating disorder? I don't know. She's throwing up every morning because she had H. pylori. We gave her the H. pylori treatment. She's not throwing up. Maybe she wasn't bulimic in the first place, you know? Lots of teenage kids, you know, they just can't function. They can't go to school. Their brains are so spaced out. They can't eat anything. You know, they break their gluten-free diet one time and eat a piece of pizza and their stomach hurts for a week. So anyways, I have a special place in my heart for children with H. pylori because it's so easy to treat. They get better fast. Everyone is happy. Jesse, one of my old patients, as a matter of fact, it's kind of ironic. I spoke to him today. I haven't spoken to him in a year or so probably. Anyways, he taught me a lot. He had insomnia and fatigue. He had a sleep disorder. So I'm like, whatever, we're going to do these labs because I run the same labs on everyone. You have a sleep problem? And he's like, well, why am I doing a stool test? Like, I don't know. I just do a stool test on everybody. Just shut up and do the stool test. And so he did the stool test, comes back with H. pylori and blasto and all these other things, right? The funny part of this is I do the routine, we get his adrenals working, we get his SIG-A better, we get his diet cleaned up, his microbiome's working better, and then finally we treat the H. pylori. And he comes back in, I will never forget this, and says, Dan, I can sleep through the night now. And I'm going, well, Jesus, how did that happen? We haven't even done the treatment for your sleep yet, you know, that's going to come later. He's like, well, I don't know. Turns out that I was waking up in the middle of the night when my stomach was hurting. I didn't even realize that's what was happening. And now I just sleep through the night ever since I started taking this Mastica stuff. So this guy's insomnia was him waking up in the middle of the night because his stomach hurt. And he didn't even report that. He didn't realize that's why he was waking up. It's just when the stomach pain was gone, he figured out, oh, so you never know how this is going to work out and how it's going to help people, okay? Again, adrenal stress support, stress reduction, the diet that we talked about, the beans, the greens, the fruits, the vegetables, you know, all that kind of stuff. Then getting into the killing with the antibiotics or herbs, and then doing all the repair stuff towards the end. All right, so stress, treatments, killing, and then recolonizing. That's really what we're looking at here. Now, I want to show you some other ramifications of this because I want you guys, you know, one thing that's happened with Richard teaching me this last couple years is, you know, he'll throw up a whole bunch of labs and then just start drilling me on connections and questions. And it's not just that he's the lead scientist in our industry, it's also that he's an extraordinarily good teacher. And so he's really impacted just the way I think about things. So I want to show you some examples of that right now, so you can see what I mean. Because, and it's more, what I want to talk about in the next few minutes is more of a thinking process than it is specific knowledge. Oh, now I know this, now I know that, okay? I want to think about this more, because you know what I realized with Richard now is that because he's been drilling me on these labs for a couple years, I've got a higher level of thinking. I can analyze the tests better. It's not necessarily specific little pieces of information, okay? It's more the ability to see into the lab. And again, I can't tell you the level this has made in up-leveling in terms of treating complex patients has really made a huge difference. So let's just pick on one marker here as an example. Here's a good one right here. So you see the marker here, D-lactate. Okay, and that's on all these organic acids profiles. If you're running these tests or you're running your NutriVals, whatever you're doing, you're going to be seeing this all the time. It could be the GI, it could be the organic acids profile, could be Great Plains. I'm pretty sure they have this on their panel. They have the organic acids as well, and you also see NutriVal, right? It's the same basic test. So D-lactate is a marker for bacterial overgrowth in the gut. Remember, if you have an H. pylori infection, you're going to have, and along with that, the person's stressed, you can easily have bad bacteria growing, not only like H. pylori, but you can have other commensal bacteria that are out of balance. You can have some of the kind of conditionally bad ones, you know, like the Klebsiellas and Enterobacters and those kind of bacteria can be off as well, right, which we would call dysbiosis. And all that going on can lead to a high level of D-lactate. And D-lactate acts as a neurotoxin. Okay, so D-lactate as a chemical in and of itself acts as a neurotoxin. So if you see a high level of D-lactate, it means there's a gut problem that's damaging the brain. I'll say that again. If you see a high level of D-lactate, it means that your gut problem, your H. pylori, your whatever it is, gut problem, is directly damaging the brain. Okay, because D-lactate is a neurotoxin. That's what it does. And in this case, look how high it is. So D-lactate is considered a problem if it goes above a 2. The 95th percentile is a 4. That's the highest it should ever be. And this patient is at a 16. So we're talking about a marker that elevates between 2 and 4. 16 is 4 times the highest level, right? This is extraordinarily high D-lactate. You're guaranteed to have cognitive symptoms. What would that be? Memory problems, fatigue, brain fog, all that coming from the gut. So this is a wonderful marker to tie in this relationship between H. pylori, dysbiotic bacteria, and the brain. So the patient's saying, I don't know, doc, you know, I'm tired and I'm so spacey, you know, I can't remember. You know, I had a real estate agent this morning that was a patient. This was a bad one. And she said, I was showing some people a house the other day, and you know, I brought them into the house, I opened the door, we walked in the door, and I forgot what I was doing. It was like she kind of momentarily didn't know where she was or what was happening, and then she had like a panic attack and freaked out. So, I mean, some people with this kind of a problem, gut-related brain issues, I mean, she's almost unable to do her job of just showing her customers, her clients a house, okay? So just keep that in mind as a connection, right? H. pylori is going to cause this imbalance or be associated with this imbalance in the bacteria. D-lactate gets out of control and you walk yourself right into a brain-related problem. I want to show you another manifestation of that right here. Same patient, right? This is another way of saying the same thing. You're going to be seeing kynurenate on all your tests. You're running organic acids. If you're not running organic acids, you should start running organic acids. I can't imagine how you can't have a functional medicine practice without organic acids. Let me just say that. You know, you can't. And you gotta. I mean, if you don't know how to interpret organic acids, just take my class. Just dish out the money. You'll never turn back. You'll never regret it. Most everybody that takes my class makes the money back that they're investing in the class even before the class is over, okay? We'll get you up to speed in learning how to interpret these. But don't try to practice without organic acids. You'll just be completely hamstrung. Okay, kynurenate, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Let me just show that image one more time. I'm going to drag it over here so you guys can see. Now, kynurenate, what does that mean? Well, we already saw the D-lactate. Now we're seeing that this kynurenate pathway is heightened. Kynurenate levels are up. That means that serotonin levels are down because tryptophan is going down the kynurenate pathway. Okay, so when you're inflamed, H. pylori dysbiosis, tryptophan goes this way over to kynurenate, and then it doesn't go towards serotonin. So kynurenate being high due to gut inflammation is going to knock your serotonin down like a rock. What does that make people? Anxious, depressed, grumpy, moody, not a happy place to be. So look at just this one patient, how much you can learn. Kynurenate is high, inflammation in the gut triggers that. And we also saw the D-lactate high, which is a neurotoxin. So this person's brain is getting munched up by the gut bacterial problems associated with H. pylori and dysbiosis. Okay, and I know this is crazy, but I'm going to say this one more time. You could have high D-lactate, high kynurenate due to H. pylori and dysbiosis with no digestive symptoms. 100% of the symptoms could be cognitive, could all be in the brain. Okay, and that's actually surprisingly common. I'm going to show you one more example, and I'm going to shut up and take some questions. I hope this is helping you guys. Oh, this is a good one. Oh, this is a really good one. Let's just use this one. Let me see. Is this as good as I think it is? Oh yeah. Yeah, this will work. They may even, yeah, this, well, yeah, let's do this one because this will teach you something that you should know. All right, so H. pylori. Now we're looking at organic acid. So we're looking at how the H. pylori manifests. Remember I said in the beginning, kind of obvious, you have a stomach infection, your stomach's messed up. We're talking about H. pylori gone bad, not H. pylori when it's protective. We're not talking about H. pylori when it's protective because that's not very interesting because those people are fine. We don't care about them. They're all right, okay? We care about the ones where the H. pylori has gone bad. And one of the things that would happen, obviously, if your stomach is messed up, is that you don't make enough hydrochloric acid, which means you're not going to be able to absorb protein, right? You're not going to be breaking down and absorbing protein. So what's that going to cause? Amino acid deficiency. And look at this organic acid test. These are real patients of mine. These are not things that I just made up. Look how low all these markers are. So we know that when organic acid markers are high, there's nutrient deficiencies. But what does it mean when all these markers are low? Oh gosh, and look at this. Look all across the board. It's just low, 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 low. DL is underneath detected limit. Does that mean they're low in B vitamins? No, it has nothing to do with B vitamins. When these markers are high, it means that the person's low in B vitamins. When these markers are low, categorically like this entire section is low, it means that there's not enough amino acids. And that was worth listening to this whole 45-minute rambling talk of mine just to learn that one thing. So let's go back. I'm going to say that one more time because this is one of the most important things that I've learned in the last couple of years. I use this trick every single day, and it is life-changing for patients. I'm not kidding. This is like a win-win-win. So remember, we're talking about low, low, low levels of those organic acid markers. And what are we actually measuring in that section of the test? We're measuring the citric acid cycle. So we know that when these markers are high, it reflects a block and a nutrient deficiency. But what about when all these markers are low? Clearly then, we're not making cellular energy, right? It's not happening. It's like a car that's run out of gas. And that is what Richard Lord calls a hypometabolic state. There's not enough mitochondrial production of energy. And you can fire that up by giving that person amino acids so they start to repair their mitochondria. Okay, free-form amino acids will just zoom. This is a win-win-win. So remember, again, I'm trying to introduce new concepts. Low levels of these markers that are related to the mitochondria. Are they reported by the lab as a problem? Not really. You don't really see it. Like, I'm going to show you another example. This is tricky. This is why I want to talk about this stuff, because you're not going to learn it anywhere else. Like, I don't know. If you looked at this test here, honestly, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that one marker's low, but all these others seem fine. You'd be like, yeah, whatever. But really, these are all low. That's low. That's low. Those are low. That's low. Those are low, right? This entire thing is a problem. In fact, this is another hypometabolic pattern, which is a much more severe and difficult problem to solve than when all these markers are high. So high levels of organic acids in general means nutrient deficiency. A pattern that's low in this section means patient needs amino acids desperately to fix the mitochondria. And remember, we already talked about this. I'm going to do a little refresher here. Remember, high levels of organic acids in this section in the bacteria can mean bacterial overgrowth if they're extraordinarily high. Low levels mean not enough polyphenols, not enough fruits and vegetables. Where do you want the levels to be? In a perfect world, they would all be in the high end of normal. Okay? High end of normal is robust, healthy, good bacterial growth. Low means not enough fruits and vegetables. Extraordinarily high means there's some overgrowth problems or dysbiosis. Okay? But just keep your eyes out for these low-level markers because they're tricky. All right, so I'm going to answer some questions real quick. I want to get my self-promotional slide up first so you guys don't forget that I want you to take my class because it's a great class. I really did spend 6 months building this whole new thing out, and somebody's got to watch it. I've had like 2 or 3 people watch the fundamentals class. I think it's the best thing I've ever done. Program design, patient communication, it's all this nitty-gritty stuff they never teach you, okay? That's included in the class. We're not charging any more. Spent 6 months doing that last year, starting on April 24th, okay? All right, so let me grab some questions here. We got another 8 minutes. I'm going to go back to the beginning. Oh, Margot, Wash U, go team. Margot's kids went to Wash U too. That's great. It's a wonderful campus. I mean, it's, oh my gosh. I won't even talk about Wash U. It's such a beautiful place. It's like Disneyland. Some believe H. pylori is normal and protective. It can be, right? Good ways to increase SIG-A, we talked about, cranking up the adrenal support. If you have virulence factors, do you always treat? So treating H. pylori is contextual, right? There has to be a problem. But if you see high D-lactate, if you see the commensal bacteria are messed up, if you see kynurenate is high, those are all things that mean you got to treat it. That's why I was trying to show you these other factors. If you see a lot of oxidative stress, you should treat it. If you see a lot of inflammation, calprotectin is high, you should treat it, right? So if you're seeing the H. pylori triggering damage, if you remember I showed you that amino acid thing, if you see low levels of amino acids on the energy portion of the test, you should treat it because these are all telling you that H. pylori is causing problems. You're seeing the ricochet effect of H. pylori. And I still do believe, as I was taught, as is naturopathic theory from the beginning of time, that the gut is the center of the naturopathic universe. The gut is the center of many of the health problems that we're dealing with. And so I don't want to diminish H. pylori. Actually, I want to elevate it and just say, hey, we respect H. pylori so much that when we decide to kill it, we want to be circumspect and careful and plan it out and not just brazenly walk in and try to knock it out. So protocols for low SIG-A are DHEA and pregnenolone. I think I just did a free webinar on this last month where I gave away all my sort of secret DHEA and pregnenolone programs. If you haven't heard that, go back and listen to the last free webinar on the adrenals because I just wrote out and taught all the secret stuff that I used to keep in the mentorship only. Why did I do that? Because I got so much new information coming into the mentorship. What I used to be my most prized intellectual property, I'm just giving away for free now. So you guys can learn how to do that. You don't even have to pay anything, okay? So blood tests, yeah. So you can do a blood test for the antibodies, a totally valid and wonderful test. You can do stool antigen testing, and you can do the PCR or DNA-based testing. So there's 3 different ways to do it. You can do all 3 if you're compulsive. If you just do one, I try to do stool antigens and the DNA testing, okay? If the blood tests are elevated, it can mean different things, right? Because those are antibody tests. So not everybody that has a positive antibody needs to be treated. Those are kind of tricky. Hiatal hernia with H. pylori. Yeah, so I'm a chiropractor by training. My chiropractor that I first saw, Richard Robert Shaw, still in practice to this day. I was driving my old, this is like I was 22 years old. You can just see Dan driving my Alfa Romeo, driving around. My dad had just died. I inherited 100 grand. First thing I did was go down and buy an Alfa Romeo. Maybe not the best financial decision, but what the hell? My dad had just was dead. I was like, screw it, I'm going to buy a car. So I'm driving my Alfa Romeo around Berkeley, California. And then I get in my car one night and I'm like, wow, I can't drive. It's night and I couldn't focus. I couldn't see. If I looked at the dashboard and then I looked up, I would get such a bad headache. I literally couldn't drive. I was like, this isn't good. So everyone's telling me you need glasses, you need glasses. I was like, I guess I need glasses. For some random reason, I went to see Richard Robert Shaw in San Francisco. He did one cranial adjustment on my skull and I could see again. And I was like, wow, this is cool, Richard. How did you do that? He was also a master of visceral manipulation as well as cranial manipulation. And so I went to chiropractic college thinking that's what all the chiropractors did because I was like, oh, this is what Richard did. So anyways, I obsessed on and learned how to do visceral and cranial manipulation. Total respect for it. If you're dealing with H. pylori and stomach problems, you should always have the stomach checked. If you don't know how to do it, you should refer out to someone who does visceral manipulation. There can be mild hiatal hernias that can make it really difficult to eradicate H. pylori. So always check the stomach on a physical level. I'm glad Margot brought that up as a question. I treat H. pylori whenever I see it on a lab if I'm suspicious based on all these other markers that I'm trying to show you tonight, okay? If H. pylori is high, but the virulence factors are negative, do I treat it first? I always do the first 2 months of microbiome and SIG-A first, unless you can't. For example, it's a woman and she wants to get pregnant in 3 months, and you just don't have the time to waste on the setup. The kid that I mentioned who's vomiting and can't play sports, we're not going to torture him with a diet for 2 months. We just treated the H. pylori. If you have to treat it right away, do it. The odds on you being successful will exponentially increase if you hold to that first 60 days and you try to reduce inflammation and strengthen the immune response. I do that as much as possible unless I can't. What happens when SIG-A is super high instead of super low? So that just means it's a newer infection and the immune system is still upregulated. Still basically do the same thing. It should be an easier case though, okay? Again, if secretory IgA is high, it usually means that the person hasn't had the gut infection for as long. It should be easier to treat it. Now, you could argue you don't have to do the whole 2 months maybe of prep work. Maybe you do a month or a few weeks or something. So if SIG-A is high, it's going to be easier to treat than if SIG-A is super low. Super low means that initially high immune response has faded. So it's usually more chronic. If a patient can only afford one lab, that's a tough one. I'd probably do inorganic acids, to be honest. And then maybe a GI test second. Because if you just do the GI test and you see H. pylori, you still don't know enough, you know? Okay, this is a good question. Do you consider any pathogens like parasites, yeast, or bacteria dysbiosis the same way? Absolutely, yes. So a patient has Giardia, a patient has Cryptosporidium, same exact conceptual framework. Boost up the SIG-A or lower it, you know, normalize the SIG-A, right? If it's high, bring it down. If it's low, bring it up. Work on the adrenals, work on the microbiome, and then go on a killing spree for Crypto, H. pylori, Giardia, Dientamoeba fragilis. The worst of all these bugs, and the one that we all miss the most, is chronic yeast or candida overgrowth. Don't forget about that. Hard to find candida on the labs. Yeah, so massica is an herb you can buy from most of the supplements. Can you have people on colostrum? Absolutely. Yeah. So for sure, you can do all the anti-inflammatory stuff while you're doing the killing or before. When do you check DHEA and pregnenolone? Anytime if it's a female, I don't think you have to correlate it with the menstrual cycle. You can do it any day of the month. D-lactate can be associated with candida. Yep. SK asked that. Let's see. Is there H. pylori parasite? Oh, that's a good question. If H. pylori parasites and other bacteria are present, what do you treat first? I have a personal order that my teacher taught me, which I follow. There's no science behind this. It's just what Dr. Timmons did, so I do it. I always treat H. pylori first, get the stomach working. Then I go over after the parasites, if they're present, and then I go after the yeast last. So I do H. pylori, parasites, yeast, just because that's what Dr. Timmons taught me. And he was a nice old man, and I figured he knew more than I did, so I just do it that way. Unless there's some reason that you have to do it differently. Susan is asking, what if the markers are a mix of high and low? A mix of high and low can be a lot of things on organic acids. So I was saying how if those energy production markers are all low, they clearly need amino acids desperately to rebuild mitochondria. If there's a combination of high and low markers, they need the amino acids, but not nearly as much. And you can solve those high and low people with things like CoQ10, magnesium, and other stuff too. Okay. Let's see. Hey, John Ross, my buddy. Hope you're doing well. Let's see. Dosage of Mastica. I go high. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of stuff I'm telling you guys is just what Timmons told me, and it works so well I never stopped. So I do 1,000 milligrams of Mastica 3 times a day. I'm going to say that like 5 times in a row. I do 1,000 milligrams of Mastica, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can do it with or without food. If they have a stomach problem, sometimes it hurts if they take it on an empty stomach, so I usually give it with food. It's probably stronger on an empty stomach, but you're going to get more negative feedback from people. 1,000 milligrams is 2 500 milligram capsules, right? So 2 500 milligram capsules, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, along with anti-inflammatory stuff. That's usually enough, and that is a boatload of Mastica. If you look at a lot of the supplement companies, it means a lot of different pills. So just think 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day if you really want to knock it out. What amino acid products do I recommend? There's one important factoid, and I'm going to have to stop because we're running out of time. I could do this class for hours, though. You guys are asking good questions. All right, I'm going to try to just get through this. We're going overtime, which I never do on the free calls. It's going to screw up the recording, but whatever. This is a really good question. You guys got to know this stuff. So if you have a situation where the mitochondria are screwed up, if I'm going to go overtime, someone has to sign up for the class, okay? Let's see here. When we're talking about damaged mitochondria, you have to rebuild these things. You just can't look at them and be nice to them. You have to physically restructure and rebuild them, and that takes amino acids. I'm going to ask a simple question, and I don't think any of you are going to know the answer to this. What is the rate-limiting step in the synthesis of all proteins except for collagen? Okay, type it into the little box thing if you know. What's the rate-limiting step in the synthesis of all proteins except for collagen? Oh, Patrick and John, you both knew. God damn it. All right, tryptophan, okay? And who knew that? Well, John and Patrick both knew it. Tryptophan is a rate-limiting step in the synthesis of all proteins except for collagen. And what does that mean? If you're going to build mitochondria, you have to have tryptophan in the patient's program, or they're not going to be able to assemble these beautiful amino acids you're giving into mitochondria, let alone what other stuff that you need to assemble. So when you're putting someone on amino acids, either make sure that the formula itself has tryptophan in it, or what's probably as good or even better is add additional tryptophan, maybe 1,000, 2,000 milligrams a day range to the amino acid powder. You got to have tryptophan, and many of the companies that we use do not have tryptophan in the amino acid powder. That's a problem. There's a lot of history behind that, but let me see. All right, let me try to zip through these questions, you guys. This has been happening in the latest mentorship calls too. My Wednesday, is it Wednesday? No, Tuesday, 5 p.m. class. I don't know what's happened. These doctors are just like frenetic and they submit so many labs. We're having like these 2-hour classes and it's just been crazy. All right, let me see. Hang on a second. Now, I don't have a kid, right? Because my kid's in college, so I don't have anyone to go cook dinner for, so I'm just going to ramble. Let me see. I'm going to get through these questions real quick. 1,000 we said. Amino acid products. I use this stuff from Pure Encapsulations. It's called Amino Replete. It has a tryptophan in it, but it's not a big deal if you use another company's. Just add tryptophan. Do I offer shorter classes? Yeah, I have one that's just on organic acids, and we have a ton of stuff. The free webinars are in a YouTube channel. Okay. I'm an RN and want to learn about organic acids testing, but can't find a lab I can order from. It's Beth. Yeah, so Beth, you would want to get the Genova organic acids test, and you may need to order it through a chiropractor or acupuncturist or medical doc, or you can use Direct Labs. DirectLabs.com carries them. You can just get it from them. Yes, I look at the virulence factors. They're really helpful to see how bad the problem is, so you know it really doesn't change the treatment, but lets you worry more about what's going on. Visceral manipulation, the Upledger Institute, John Upledger. So look up Upledger, U-P-L-E-D-G-E-R. He has all the information on that stuff. I'm not even going to touch questions about SIBO. That's like a whole nother night. We should talk about it because I have some strong opinions about SIBO, okay? But I don't want to, if I just say what I'm thinking now, you guys are going to misinterpret it. Could you use DHEA and progesterone cream? Now, the pregnenolone works better, but you can use DHEA and pregnenolone and progesterone, but I wouldn't use just the DHEA and progesterone, if I'm making sense there. So if you want to do an adrenal program, DHEA and preg and progesterone on top of that, the three. But DHEA without the pregnenolone doesn't work as well, okay? Yeah, we absolutely use charcoal or diatomaceous earth or fiber to bind up stuff. How to treat SIG-A is all done through the adrenal program. So that's the DHEA and pregnenolone. And again, I had a free lecture on that last month. You guys can do that. Oh, how long on the mastica? 2 months. If you get a metallic taste in the mouth, usually means there's a gallbladder problem or something else like that going on. So you want to check gallbladder. BCAAs are more for athletic stuff, and the free-form amino acids are more general use. All right. So tryptophan versus 5-HTP. I'm going to say it one more time. What's the rate-limiting step in the production of all proteins? All proteins is a big statement. All proteins is like grab your arm. That's your entire arm. All proteins is your liver. All proteins is your brain. All proteins is your mitochondria. All proteins is all proteins, guys. Tryptophan is a rate-limiting step in all proteins. If you don't have enough tryptophan in your programs, people can't synthesize proteins. They can't make amino acids into proteins. 5-HTP, in some ways, is far superior for bringing serotonin up. That's a whole different discussion we're not talking about. Okay, let me say that again. 5-HTP is superior for bringing serotonin up. We're not talking about serotonin today. That's what 5-HTP is better for, okay? Do you follow level? Yeah, so we monitor people every 6 months when we're doing this. Can I take organic acids from you and then be able to order it from your client? Yeah, Beth, if you really want to do this, just call my office and set up a talk, and I'll talk you through how to do it, okay? And if you just want to do organic acids training by itself, we have it as a separate course. And it's not that expensive. I price everything at around $1,000 a month, okay? That's kind of my general theory about how expensive things should be. And then we have payment plans, so you don't have to, you know, it's like around $1,000 a month. Let me show you here for Beth. There we are. Classes. Go to my website, hit on classes. My practice plan is a business class, the 1-year mentorship, and then organic acids only. It's $49.95, and you know it's probably going to be around $1,000 a month. Okay, once you do the payments. For someone going through your program, could count the hours towards hours for certified nutrition specialist. I've done that in the past. I don't know, depending on the program, I'm happy to help you fill out paperwork because we have a huge number of hours in here. So it just depends on the program, but I have had some students do that before. Okay, I don't offer CMEs, but we often can do these other things. All right. So again, 5-HTP is fine for serotonin-related problems, but tryptophan, we're talking about assembling proteins. If the patient is inflamed, and if the patient has a problem with quinolinic acid, they still need tryptophan, okay? You're not going to make someone worse giving them tryptophan. You're going to be improving protein synthesis. I'm going to sign off. I love you guys. This was a really great class. The questions were really wonderful, which usually means that you guys are into it. Call me. Somebody has to sign up for the class, or I'm not going to keep doing these free things, okay? Somebody's just got to bite the bullet, spend $1,000 a month, just figure it's time to do it. Dan's at a really good space in his life. You should do it before I retire, or before, I don't know, like I could just go back to Thailand and be in a monastery and you guys won't have access to this. All right, so come on in, learn all this stuff, and I'll catch up with you next month when we do another seminar. Okay, bye for now.